You don't have to look around too far to recognize that the needs of this world are really great. The needs of people are extreme. The needs of the world are great, and I am not. I realize that profoundly. I feel often very inadequate to meet needs around me. It can be overwhelming, and I'm sure many of you have felt that before, or maybe even right now. You feel a bit of, I don't have this. This is so far beyond what I am or what I have to offer. Good news, I'm not great and you're not great, but God is. God is great. He can do far more than we ever hope or imagine. Hudson Taylor, who was a 19th century missionary to China, said when God wanted the gospel to go to inland China, he looked for a man that was weak enough and found me. Robert Morrison, who was the first Protestant missionary to go to China in 1807, when asked, "Do you really expect to make an impact on that great land?" he said, "No, sir, but I expect God to." Would we this morning be willing to have that same kind of posture? To give to God whatever it is that we have, even though we feel insufficient and what we have seems so inadequate, and we would simply trust Him with it to accomplish what He will, His great will. Because few of us here in this room, very few are going to do what the Hudson Taylors or the Robert Morrisons of this world have done and just pack up and go to some foreign country and dedicate your entire life to ministering to a different culture, a different language. But every single person in this room who says that you are a follower of Jesus, you have something to give. You have something to offer today, right here, right now. No matter how insignificant you may feel or how inadequate what you have seems to be. This is our 5th week in our sermon series on generosity and giving. And you may be thinking, wow, this series really came at an inconvenient time. Is there ever a convenient time to be challenged to give? To be challenged to give of our time and our talent and our treasures? Would we ever say, now's a great time, please ask me now? Probably not. You could say when things are different, when I get my act together, when I have more to give, when I just have time to sit down and think about it more, then ask me. But those times really don't come. Now's the time. Life is full of inconveniences, if you haven't noticed. Life is full of unmet expectations. You were hoping things would be this way, and they just didn't turn out that way. This is exactly what the disciples are learning once again when you turn the Bible open to Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44. This passage starts out this way, with unmet expectations. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. Hey, we're really going to get this promised time of rest together. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. Really? The disciples had just returned from short-term missions trips. They had been sent out 2 by 2. They're tired. They have poured themselves out. They're needy. They're ready for rest. Jesus has even just said, I'm going to give you some rest. They've barely had time to eat, it says. Some of us never forget to eat. I'm one of those. Some of you, like, you can work 8 hours and it's like, oh my goodness, I forgot to eat. Or you moms, you're like, man, I fed everybody else in the house today, but I haven't eaten. So you finally sit down to eat, and then someone knocks at the door. Like, Or you finally lay down to take that rest, and the phone rings. Or you're finally packing for the weekend away when some family need arises. It's an unmet expectation, and it robs you of your peace in that moment. In those moments, will we trust God? Will we believe that Jesus really does know my need and he is with me? Even though this isn't what I wanted. He really does know your need. He is a good shepherd. He is the one that Psalm 23 describes. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul, and he will. He will do this. Even in the midst of the interruption, even in the midst of the inconvenience, even in the midst of the unmet expectation, he will do this. In the midst of your canceled plans, he says, come away. Come away. I will give you rest. And sometimes that rest is simply a power nap. But he knows what you need. He does. The disciples get in a boat. After they've debriefed all of their ministry, they get in a boat. They're going to the other side, hoping to get this rest. And they find out that the hour trip in the boat was the rest they're going to get. Will they receive it that way? Because people need us. Jesus knew good and well there was going to be people on the other side. This didn't catch him by surprise. And he knew people are going to need us, and people are going to need you, my followers, my disciples. If we're needy, everybody's needy. Psalm 40:17. Is this you? Probably. As for me, I am poor and needy. But the Lord takes thought for me. You are my help and my deliverer. Do not delay, oh my God. Does that ring true in your life? I am poor and needy. Please do not delay. Oh my God. And I think that God, when we pray that and we say that honestly, he says, I won't delay. But my disciples might. And I like to use my disciples to accomplish my will. I'm not going to delay. But I do have some disciples I would like to use, and they probably in this moment would really like to just put off giving. They wouldn't mind putting off serving for a little while. I won't delay, but my disciples right now feel inadequate. They feel inconvenienced. They were looking forward to some time alone in a restful place, and then you arrive at verse 34. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd. Verse 44 tells us it's 5,000 men plus others. Wow. That's a big crowd. Is this an interruption? It wasn't for Jesus. He knew this was going to happen. Is it an interruption or an opportunity? And he wants his disciples to see this is an opportunity. I know you. I know your need. I know you're tired. I'm with you. Hang in there. This is an opportunity. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, we must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God, God will be constantly crossing our paths, canceling our plans by sending us people with claims and petitions. So we have to remember behind interruptions are interrupters that are people like you and like me who have needs. And behind that, there is the great interrupter, God himself. Would we recognize that? This is inconvenient. I didn't expect this. But God may be the one that's actually giving this opportunity right now. He may want to interrupt my time. He may want to interrupt my conversation when I'm trying to justify why I shouldn't have to do such things. He may want to interrupt my plans with my treasure. Generosity usually interrupts such things. And God says to us, "Is all that you have mine? Is this hour mine? Is this moment mine?" No, stop talking. Stop explaining. Is it mine? Look at the shore. Talking to all y'all on the boat. Look at the shore. Are you with me? There's 5,000 plus people on the shore. Are you with me? Will you trust me right now in this moment? There's two responses that we see in the passage to what they just see on the shore. 5,000 people. One is, this is a lost moment. This was my moment, and now it's lost. But Jesus says, no, this is a life moment. This is good. This is a life moment. The great theologian John Lennon said, life is what happens to you when you are making other plans. That's pretty true. The disciples had other plans, and now life is happening. Jesus says, this is a life moment. I want you to be with me and see what's going to happen. So two responses, Jesus' response and the disciples' response. Jesus responds with compassion. Now this account right here of feeding the 5,000 is in all four Gospels. But Mark alone gives us the reason why Jesus responds with compassion. Okay, I'm going to read 34 through 36. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and the villages to buy themselves something to eat." So we get the reason for Jesus' compassion here. It's because he looked at them and he said, they are like sheep without a shepherd. What does this mean? In a previous sermon, I gave this illustration of what it means to be sheep without a shepherd, and that gave us Turkey. In 2005, CBS reported that some shepherds had left their herds to graze while the shepherds were eating some breakfast. And the report said, first one sheep jumped to its death, then 1,500 others followed, each leaping off the same cliff. In the end, 450 dead animals lay on top of one another in a billowy white pile. That's sheep without a shepherd. As Ezekiel would say in his prophecy 34:5, they were scattered, they became food for all the wild beasts. That's sheep without a shepherd. Zechariah would put it as, they wander, they are afflicted for lack of a shepherd. Matthew, in his account of this same story of the feeding of the 5,000, says they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. This is a problem. It leads to affliction. It leads to helplessness, being scattered, wandered, to being attacked. They need a shepherd. And Jesus looks at this as an opportunity, and he says, I will be their shepherd. This is a life moment. They are wandering, they are helpless, they are afflicted, they are in need. And it says he feels compassion, or the Greek word splanchnizomai, which means he feels deep, visceral mercy that will move him into action. This word means empathetic readiness. I feel empathy and I am ready to do something about it. That's what Jesus feels right here. The first part of that word, splankna, is gut. It means he's feeling it inside, and he's got to get rid of that feeling. He must do something to resolve it. So that's Jesus' response to what he just saw on the shore. Compassion. But the disciples respond with exhaustion, and you can hardly blame them. They know all these people need food, and they're like, we could use some food too. And so like their answer to Jesus is, just let them figure it out, right? We're hungry too. Just let them go. They'll figure it out. So Jesus wants to gather everybody in care. The disciples want to scatter everybody and get some rest. The disciples see 5,000 problems that they know they can't solve. They're believing in this moment there is not enough. There's not enough daylight. There's not enough food. There's not enough energy. There's not enough money. We do not have what it takes, Jesus. He's like, you're in the right place. You're right. You don't have what it takes. And I know that in this moment, you're probably disappointed. You're disappointed in me. You're disappointed in yourselves, in the situation. You're facing your own inadequacy. Oh, but would you just raise your eyes and see who stands in the midst of you? God stands in the midst of them, by the way. And he answers them. In that moment, he speaks in verse 37, 38. He answered them, you give them something to eat. Give them something to eat. And they said to him, I can just hear the sigh. Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? That's like, 2/3 of an annual salary back then. They're like, are you kidding? And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. God uses earthly means to accomplish his heavenly purposes. He wants to use the disciples. He wants to use this little tiny bit of earthy stuff that they have. And he says, watch what we're going to do. My will be done. This is the way he's always worked, by the way. Go all the way back to the beginning of Genesis, and you find Adam and Eve placed in a garden that God has planted, and he says, I'm going to use you. I want you to nurture this garden. I want the garden to expand. I want it to fill the earth. I want it to flourish. I want other people to experience this right here. He uses people to accomplish these great purposes that he has. He uses a wooden rod in the hand of Moses. He used a small rock in the hand of David. He uses bread and fish, earthly means, to accomplish these great heavenly ends. And he says, you feed them. You feed them. This is a command. It could almost be translated, you feed them now. Feed them. And he says it's a test of faith. I say that because in John's account of this story, John 6:5, he says, seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? And he said this to test him. He's saying to his disciples, he's saying to us, I want you to feed them. I know you feel like you have nothing, but do this. Will you walk by sight or will you walk by faith? Will you look at it and go, there's just not enough here? Or will you just walk by faith? Will you trust that there is enough when you give me what you have? Jesus doesn't ask us to give what we don't have. He said, what do you have? How many loaves do you have? He's just asking us to give what we have. Like the pastor who goes to the farmer and he's trying to get his farmer to understand that he should be giving to the Lord. And so this is a bit of a test for the farmer. He says, now, brother, if you had 2 farms, would you give one to the Lord? He says, oh, yes, I would do that. But, I mean, I'm not in a situation to do that. I don't own 2 farms, but if I did, I would certainly give him one. And brother, if you owned 2 acres of corn, would you give an acre to the Lord? Absolutely. But I'm not in that situation. I don't have 2 acres of corn. He says, well, if you own 2 pigs, would you give? Now, hold on, pastor. You know good and well I got 2 pigs. And isn't that how we are? If only I had more, I would give. And then he says, will you give what you have? What do you have? This is what I'm asking you to give. God doesn't ask us to give what we don't have. Probably the first thing we need to do is just give him over our fears, our insecurities about this. God, let me just lay these before you. I'm uncertain. Would you take me to the next level? Would you help me to trust you? Will you help me to obey you? And he says, how many loaves do you have? Yes, I'll help you. How many loaves do you have? Go and see, he says. Go and see. And God provides. They do. They go and they see. What were the disciples expecting now? There's 5,000 men plus women and children there. I'm sure they're expecting they're going to find something. So they go and they look and they see very, very little. In the story in John's account, 6:9, Andrew says, there's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that with this huge crowd? Now I'm thinking there's 5,000 men plus women and kids. 1 kid brought lunch? Where are the homeschool moms in this whole crowd? Certainly somebody was prepared. Nope. So in spite of the disciples' little faith, and despite of the little bit of food they have, they do exactly what Jesus asked them to do. How much do you have? Go and see. They go and see. They bring it to him. They obey with the little bit that they have. It's a beautiful, quiet obedience now. And it accomplishes more than any wild activity could have done. They could have been like, okay, let's figure out how to make salads out of the grass. Let's go hunt animals, whatever. It's not frantic. It's simply, let's just go and do what he said. This quiet obedience, this simple movement is better than frantic activity. It's like a hula hoop, you know? You can give it all the frantic activity you want and not keep it up. Then somebody does just some simple movement, and it's like, okay, this is what God's calling us to do. A simple move towards him. Gentle, quiet, trusting obedience. And let's see what he can do. They do this, and God shatters expectations. Just shatters expectations. 39 through the end of this passage, verse 44. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the grass, green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. He divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. They took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish, and those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. 1 kid, 5 loaves, 2 fish, 12 disciples, 2 stages in God's work. Impossible and done. 2 stages in God's work. This is impossible. Oh, it's done. Would we trust God? God can shatter our pint-sized expectations if we would just bring him what we have. Jesus didn't need what they didn't have, only what they had, and it was enough. So Jesus takes this small basket and he creates a banquet. Verse 39 said, then he commanded them all to sit down in groups. The word group there is symposium. It means banquet. It's sometimes interpreted drinking party. Sit down. We're going to have a party with what you just gathered. This word is used of Greek philosophers coming together with entertainment and music. It's like a festival. Sit them down in banquets. Let's celebrate what we have. It's interesting that Mark would use this phrase because just before this, in the passage right before this, we have another banquet. It's Herod's banquet. And if you remember, Herodias comes in and dances before him, and he says, I'll give you anything that you want. What do you want? Half of my kingdom. She says, give me John the Baptist. Give me his head on a platter. And they kill. The banquet that took place right before this resulted in death because of selfish interest. The banquet that takes place here because of selfless compassion results in life. Verse 42, all ate and were satisfied. Even the exhausted disciples who were inconvenienced and thought their expectations weren't going to be met, sit down and are satisfied. I'm going to give you rest. Will you trust me? God often puts us in positions of helplessness. He places us in gospel moments just like this where we say, I can't do this. God, you have to do this. And he will. Just give him what you have. God can take your little tiny Lunchable and turn it into a banquet, a lavish feast, if we will just obey and trust him. We got to remember the gospel is not just to overcome my death one day. It is to overwhelm my life every day. Will I walk in these gospel moments, trusting him with it? Help me, Lord, to see this not as a lost moment, but as a life moment, a gospel moment. So Jesus takes a basket and he creates a banquet, and he takes this one little moment and he reveals eternity. One kid, 5 loaves, 2 fish, 12 disciples who trust and obey. And what do the people see because of their trust and obedience? They see the promised one. They see the promised prophet, the one that Moses described in Deuteronomy 18:15 when he said, the Lord God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen. So like Moses, the one who led sheep through the wilderness, who fed them in a desolate place. We read in John, when the people saw the sign that he had done, when he fed them all, they said, this is indeed the prophet who has come into the world. Because of their obedience, because of giving what they had, all of a sudden people go, he's the one. Where Moses pointed to the bread in the wilderness, Jesus is creating bread in the wilderness. He's creating bread from grain that never grew on the earth. He's creating fish that never hatched or swam in the water. He's showing, I am God. I am the creator. And because of your obedience, my disciples, people are seeing this. He takes a moment and he reveals eternity. All things were made through him, John says. Without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life. Jesus said, you feed them. Feed them, and they're going to see this. Just give what you have, and they're going to know this. What was the point? That Jesus is the Lord of all, that he is the creator of all, that he is the sustainer of all life, that he is the bread of life. He is the one who in the beginning said, let there be, let there be, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and here he says, let there be bread. He's the one who said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures in the beginning. And here he says, let there be fish. And he makes fish. This is the wonder and majesty of what is taking place on this mountainside. A tiny little moment on a Galilean hillside with 1 kid, 5 loaves, 2 fish, 12 disciples. And he alone can take what little they have and make it great. He alone converts this desolate place into a banquet table, and he shows himself to the world in need. The need of the world is great, and I am not. But I know the one who is. Will I just give him what I have? So, in closing, all because of this one insignificant boy gave what he had, and then these 12 disciples gave what they had found. This little boy, he's only mentioned one time in the whole Bible, in John 6:9. Only in John's account does it tell us about this boy. No name, no background, no mention again. He could be any of us. We could be him. We never know which little insignificant person God will use or how he will multiply what little we have to offer. And all because these exhausted disciples with unmet expectations simply trusted and obeyed Jesus. Please, my friends, don't disregard the value of small beginnings. You have something to give to God. What do you have? Go and see. Bring it to God. You say, Dan, you don't know how small it is. Oh, I don't, but God does. And he says in Zechariah 4:10, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. He says, I used a wooden stick in the hand of Moses to show that I'm strong, that I deliver, that I give life. I used a stone in the sling of my servant David to show that I am strong, that I give life, that I deliver. I used a few loaves and a couple fish in the hands of my disciples to show that I am strong, that I deliver, that I give life. What do you hold in your hand today? What is it? To what or to whom are you bound that you wouldn't give it? Are you willing to give it all? Am I willing to give it all? Oh God, far be it from me to doubt you and your great power. This world is in such great need, and I am not great, but you are. Will we but trust him with the little that we have? Here's my time. Here's my talent. Here's my talk. Here's my treasure. I give you what I have. It seems so small. Would you do great things with it?